and Alexis and I are asking the question, are Common Core standards better for student learning than previous state standards? Previous standards were the Curriculum and Assessment Standards for School Mathematics of 1989, Improving America's Schools Act of 1994, No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, and American Diploma Project Network of 2005. The Curriculum and Assessment Standards for School Mathematics of 1989 increased problem-oriented activities to help students learn better. It increased real-world applications in math problems, and since technology had evolved in this time, standards for showing work also changed. The Improving America's School Act of 1994 reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which Alexis talked about in our previous presentation with Yesenia and Macy. It also held schools accountable for holding disadvantaged students' results at the same level as others. It required states to develop standardized tests to measure school performance against others. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 focused on closing the achievement gaps between schools, and it revived common standards discussion because of shortcomings found while creating the No Child Left Behind Act, such as the state's different definitions for proficiency, and the high school graduates need help in college, so a lot of the high school standards needed to be changed and closed a gap there. The American Diploma Project Network of 2005 aligned high school academic standards, graduation requirements, assessment accountability systems with college and career demands. Now, the Common Core standards, so for mathematics, Common Core says that they concentrate on a clear set of math skills and concepts. Students will learn concepts in a more organized way, both during the school year and across grades. The standards encourage students to solve real-world problems. For English, the Common Core says that they ask students to read stories and literature as more complex texts that provide facts and background knowledge in areas such as science and social studies. Students will be challenged and asked questions that push them to refer back to what they've learned, and this stresses critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical skills that are required for success in college, career, and life. A comparison between the previous standards and Common Core standards for English is that the Arizona standards treated literary and non-literary text in more detail than Common Core, but Common Core more thoroughly addressed listening and speaking skills, and they include some examples of student writing to clarify what they expect students to do in each grade. For math, on the other hand, I found less detailed comparisons, but I found that Arizona scored a B and Common Core scored an A- in math. This graph here shows how the education in the U.S. has increased over the years before Common Core and during Common Core, and at the end of Common Core here in 2015 for Arizona, it starts to drop. Some states still use Common Core, and some, like Arizona, have moved on and adopted something similar. My personal perspective on the difference between previous state standards and Common Core is that although Common Core was more detailed in their expectations for students, it created less intimacy and differentiation in education. So with Common Core, the government takes control of education, which is not in the Constitution and therefore not really constitutional. When the national government takes over education, there is no differentiation for the communities where kids may need to learn different things. Also, when education is in the government's hands, parents have no say in their child's education. Teachers also get the short end of the stick because they will not be able to innovate to meet the unique needs of their students. Here, and that link at the bottom is my resource for this slide, and this next page has all of my resources for my previous slides.
So for the background of perspectives for this specific subject area, we have you're either for Common Core or you're either completely against it. It's kind of like during Halloween where there's a group of people who really, really, really like candy corn and the people who really dislike it. There's not really any in between. There was an influx of articles on the dislike of Common Core, but I found Thomas Kirk's article on Common Core and the disagreements against it, and I felt like it was a really good compilation of all of the different articles that I found. He did have 8 points though. There are only 3 here, but these are the ones that I saw show up in a lot of the other articles. So for the first main point, there was the conflict of interest. And the first thing that comes to my mind is no taxation without representation. So back during that time, it's kind of similar to what is happening now, is that people in their government were making decisions for a group of people, but those people who were making decisions weren't really affected by those decisions. So I kind of find it similar to our situation that state education agency leaders are making the Common Core state standards. But in reality, they're not really financially affected by any of those decisions. So of course they're going to be all willy-nilly with it and not really take that much time and thought into it. So why wouldn't it be teachers? Why wouldn't it be people who are completely involved in this specific area? It's kind of like what Thomas Kirk, he made a metaphor with what if we had representatives of pharmaceutical companies make health guidelines. Those people don't really know a lot about it. Why isn't the pharmaceutical staff? Why isn't it doctors? Why are they making these decisions when they're not even financially affected by it, or they really don't know what they're talking about? For the second point that Thomas Kirk had is the misdiagnosis of the problem. So right now, how I think of it is that we are teaching kids that, oh, you know, we're just going to be we're training them to be jumping in puddles. This is what they are expecting. They're expecting shallow water just to splash around in, and they're having fun in it. You know, they're learning this much, and everybody's learning the same amount, when in reality, when they transition, they're actually going into a deep pool. Let me elaborate on this. It might seem a little weird. So right now, we're teaching them all the same thing. We're teaching them to read to this specific reading proficiency level. And once they get into high school, all of a sudden, we're into difficult readings like different classic novels like To Kill a Mockingbird, Romeo and Juliet, things that are kind of hard to really understand if you jump straight into it. When in reality, this is what we're doing. So right now what we're doing is Common Core, everybody reads the same. And then all of a sudden we're jumping into difficult reading. And then what tends to happen is that we resort to resources rather than learning. Resources as in SparkNotes, resources as in summaries on the back of the pages, not because we're lazy. It's not our generation that we're lazy, that students are lazy, because there are a group of kids that they know how to read and they know how to read to that level. So of course they're going to read it because it's fun, because they feel as if they are capable of doing it. But right now we're leading from easy to really difficult readings that they don't believe that they're capable of doing. So of course they resort to things because they feel like they can't do it. So they're going to give up. When it is our job as teachers to give them that passion, to awaken it in them that they are capable of doing these things. So right now we're going from easy to completely hard when we should be doing easy, medium to hard, so that we have a nice smooth transition so that they don't feel like they're incapable of doing these assignments. The third point is the developmental inappropriateness. So in the past, let's just for an example, this isn't specific, but we had 4th grade learning to 4th grade learning standards. But now, with Common Core standards, we took the people that were in 4th grade and the highest proficiency that we knew, that the highest excelling students that they thought, okay, everybody can get to this point. So this is this common standard that we're going to hold everybody up to. Now they're expecting everybody to get to that level, but also 4th grade, this is 6th grade. 6th grade standards are now being replaced by that. So now 4th grade has to be learning to the standards of 6th grade at the highest proficiency level as well. So now that group of kids that are falling behind, it's even larger because they can't reach to that standard. Yes, there's a group of kids who can. Those are the honor students, so those are the students that can learn a little bit better, learn linguistically, because that's basically what we focus on is textbook, reading, and worksheets. And we shouldn't be focusing on learning styles, and we shouldn't limit them, but a lot of the majority of the time we're learning just linguistically. I am a visual learner and I fall behind sometimes if I don't get that visual or more kinesthetic learning. So that group of linguistics, and it's not just specifically linguistic, but those students that can learn to that 6th grade level are going to excel, but that large group of kids that cannot learn even to their proficiency of their normal standards are falling behind. And so we have an inappropriateness of what their standards is and what they can meet. And so now it leads me to the people who are for Common Core, and their basic argument is that it's more subject area, that these Common Core guidelines help these subject areas. So the main arguments is for ELA, language arts, and math. So everybody knows that math, you need those specific guidelines in order to reach to the highest one, because you have to know what was before it in order to know what the next step is. For example, 2 + 2 = 4, but you need to know that in order to know what 2 × 2 is, which is 4. You need to know what 2 × 2 is in order to understand what 2 squared is. So you have to know, you have to have these and meet these specific guidelines, or the student's going to fall behind. So that's completely understandable. But ELA is a little bit harder to understand, so that's why I'm focusing on it in this presentation. So like I said, it assists with specific subject area, specific topics, and what their main argument is for ELA is that this forces the kids, not forces, but it pushes the kids to read specific books that they would not normally pick up. So for me, I would think that I'm not able to read Harry Potter because it's a thick book. So if it's a thick book and it's sitting on the desk, I'm going to be like, honestly, I don't think I can read that well. I don't think I'm going to finish that even in a month. But if it is assigned to me and I start reading it and I start to realize, hey, I am capable of doing this, but it took that extra push. It took that, how are we ever going to get out of our comfort zone if somebody doesn't push it? Because if we're not going to do it ourselves, somebody else has to try and encourage us. And that's the job of a teacher. So it gives them titles that they can also relate to. So one, they wouldn't pick it up because it's thicker. And let's say it's thicker or it's known as a book that's going to be harder. But if they see that, one, they are capable of reading it if they start to read it, and two, if they're able to relate to it, people that believe in Common Core believe that they can relate to it and it'll motivate them to read more books because they say, hey, this is actually a really cool, awesome thing. So that's Common Core's main argument, one with math and one with ELA. My own personal perspective, in a perfect world, we can live in a world like V for Vendetta. And if you've never read V for Vendetta, basically the moral of the story is that amongst anarchy or chaos, natural leadership will form. So out of chaos, of course, one person is going to stand to that position of being a leader, or guidelines. Natural guidelines will rise out of the ashes. And in a perfect world, of course, we can say that there's no guidelines, but the natural ones and the ones that actually do help are going to arise. But this is a child's education that we're talking about. There's only so many risks that we can take. There's only so many guinea pigs that we can risk, because they only have one chance to have an education. And because everybody is continuously growing, we need to be able to not completely wreck everything and have rules come from there. So one thing that I agree with not having Common Core is the conflict of interest, that the people that are not actually involved or who are affected in it are making the decisions for that the teachers have to follow. I do believe that a teacher is a gardener, and I do believe that every student is different. Every student has a different growth. So let's say from the article that I got, 1 in 3 students have racial or ethnic minority background. Those, let's say, are carrots. They grow differently. Maybe they need a little bit more water. Maybe they need a little bit more sunlight. Maybe they need specific needs that only the gardener is going to know, not the person who manufactures the seeds. No, they're not going to know. It'll be the gardener because they're with them all the time and they're continuously growing them. So, and also, like a cabbage, 1 in 5 children younger than 18 lives in poverty. Those people are going to grow differently than the carrots. These different plants, and there's so many other plants, there's so many other different diverse backgrounds that we have to take into account as gardeners, as teachers. So these people need to make policies that are surrounding around the student. It's like making a lesson and not changing it. When I've heard that the lesson doesn't stay the same. It's always, you have to see how the students are reacting to it and form it around them. You don't just regurgitate something you made 18 years ago. So that's one thing that I agree with. I do agree, though, with having Common Core within those specific subjects that need it. So specifically, for my opinion, it's math. So it just makes your life a lot easier. It makes the person's life when they grow up a little bit easier because math is used more often than you think. Let's say you're at the supermarket and you're walking by and you're like, I need 24 apples, and there's like a little grid of apples. And instead of counting each individual one, you know that there's 4 on the side, there's 6 on the top, times tables, 24. It just makes your life a little bit easier, and it's used in baking. It's used in a lot of different aspects. And like I've said before, you need to know those basic steps. You need to hit those specific standards in order to understand the rest, because it just makes your life easier. How are you going to understand calculus if you've never done college algebra? These are the references that I used for my slides.